Okay, great. So we have the configuration ready. Let's go and build the actual pipeline. I'm already logged in into my GitLab account, as you can tell, and I'm going to be creating a new project. And again, I like to create simple projects so that I can show you the integration of active testing with GitLab in isolation. If I had all my code in the pipeline, if I had if I was doing the real thing, right, it's going to be a much busier project, and that's not my goal. So let's create a blank project. Let's give it a name. I'm going to call it AT, and then I'm going to put a date, 2023 08 12, so you know exactly when I'm actually recording this. And I'm going to create a project. I'm going to give it a few seconds. There we go. We got the project done, and I'm going to create a brand new pipeline under build pipeline, and I'm going to also create the simplest pipeline that I can find, which is this hello world one. Try test template. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe out all the comments unnecessary for our end, for our purpose, and of course kill the pop-up if you get it too. All right, and move this to the top. Okay, and I'm going to commit the changes, and the pipeline is going to start. I don't have to wait for it, and I'm not going to wait for it. You see 60 seconds, 10 seconds. I usually prune this, but this time I forgot. No big deal. So I'm going to go under the pipelines, and you will see it's going to start. Everything's going to work as expected, because at the end of the day, the only thing this template pipeline does is echo and wait. Echo and sleep, actually. Echo and sleep. That's the only thing it does. That's not my goal. So what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the repository for our integration. So we're going to go under code repository. And remember, when I was generating the active testing configuration, I specify some relative paths like OpenAPI specification and so on. So I need to come in here and create a folder, new directory, and I'm going to call this folder OpenAPI specification. I'm going to use this folder to pretty much store all my OpenAPI specification files. So I'm going to create this directory. Here we are right underneath it. So now I'm going to go ahead and upload my OpenAPI specification file. So I'm going to select upload. Again, you can say drop, upload, whichever way you want to do it. I'm going to select upload. Again, it's under your student files, NS401 active testing files, and I'm going to select users-oas.yaml, open, and upload. Here it is. This is the OpenAPI specification file, and I want to do the same exact thing at the OpenAPI specification level. So I'm using the breadcrumb links at the top, and I'm going to do another upload. And this time I'm going to navigate under one flight ID, and I'm going to select flights OpenAPI specification.yaml, and I'm going to select open. And I'm going to upload as well. And right now we should have two files, right? So here's the flights OpenAPI specification. Head back to OAS. Here's the two files. Now I'm going to go back to the top level of my repository. I'm going to create one more folder, new directory. I'm going to name it no name, because under this folder I'm going to have the configuration file, that active config.yaml file I was showing you earlier on. I'm under the no name folder. I'm going to upload yet again. Upload. It's under my downloads. Downloads. Here it is. Active config.json. And we're going to select open. And we're going to upload the file yet again. All right, great. So if I go at the top level of my repository, here's my OpenAPI specification containing the two files. Verify you uploaded both files to the right spot. Go back, no name, verify you uploaded the active config JSON in the right spot. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and inspect what the heck happened with my pipeline. Everything should be good, right? Actually, still running. Oh yeah, of course it's still running. It's running because I'm uploading all kind of different files. That's why it's running. The original one passed, right? I'm creating folders, I'm creating files, and every time I do something, it starts running, right? It starts running. That's okay. We see the very first two completed successfully. That's good. Everything should complete successfully. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and set up now my pipeline phase, stage, job, whichever way you want to call it, specific to active testing, right? Specific to active testing. To do all that, we need to set up a couple of values, right? Some of these values are sensitive. So if I go back to active testing and I select this cicd parameters pop-up, you will see that we're dealing with passwords, we're dealing with tokens, right? So these are sensitive. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to go under the settings of your project and create, I don't know, masked variables, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do. So back to GitLab. Let's head over to settings and expand CICD. And again, if you're wondering why I choose to use GitLab, primarily because the very first time I teach this class was for a customer that used GitLab, right? Secondarily, because I found it so intuitive, right? I personally find GitLab so intuitive. It's so easy to work with, at least for my purposes, right? At least for my purposes, training. So let's expand variables, and we're going to add a brand new variable. Here it is. So the job right now is to copy and paste. So grab the Active Registry, not user, password, copy, head over on the other side and paste as plain text. Careful when you copy and paste stuff, right? You don't mess it up. Now we're going to grab the value. Thank God for the value. We have this easy copy to clipboard type of a button. And we're going to head back and we're going to paste it as plain text. Here it is. Again, our branch is not protected, so we don't have to protect this variable. We only have to mask it. And add variable. Voila. We're going to add one more variable. Active API token. Same type of an exercise, guys. Copy, paste as plain text to the key. And now we're going to grab the value. And paste yet again. And yet again, uncheck protect, check mask. And add the variable. These are the two variables we need encrypted. You can add as many as you like, right? You can add all the variables in the world in here, but you don't have to, right? These two are necessary, I find. Otherwise, it will be plain text, which is bad. Okay, let's head back now to the build, let's check the pipelines. Are they all done? Yep, they're all done. They're all hunky-dory, right? So let's go now to the pipeline editor, because we want to modify now this configuration. Now, before I forget, let's change the 60 seconds to 6 seconds so we don't have to wait indefinitely, right? All those extra minutes. Well, 70 seconds is not indefinitely, but still, you know what I mean. So make it a little shorter. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce an extra stage. And we choose to do it right after the unit testing. Come on. There we go, space. And we're going to call it no name hyphen scan. So that's our stage. Right now, what we need to define is a set of variables and a job that associates with no name scan. Thankfully, I already have all that information available to us, guys. So here it is. It's under 2cicd gitlab.yaml. So for the most part, all the information you need are here, right? So I can open my Emacs. As you can see, I've done it earlier on when I was trying things on my own. So if I expand this a little bit and I go under the files to CICD and then I open the GitLab file, here you go. So here's the configuration. Pretty much what we need is these two variables and the scan job configuration, which is this thing right here. So let's copy and paste first, and then I'm going to explain what happens. So let's copy these lines. can do the same thing. You can copy the same exact lines on your end. If you're doing it with GitLab. If you're not doing it with GitLab, you got to make sure you replicate this command. You set up your variables any way your cicd tool provides you, allows you to do it, and then you replicate these commands. Okay, so in my case, I can just select this, head back to GitLab, and I choose to place it right underneath the stages because it is convenient, and I'm pasting. Make sure your pasting is accurate. Make sure when you specify these hyphens, you don't put spaces right after. GitLab is going to complain profusely, right? So what happens? So here's the scan, the states that we added, and here's the variables. The very first one is active API URL. This URL is from an old discontinued active testing instance. So this is not available to us. We got to use the one that is provided to us by that cicd parameters pop-up. So wipe it out and head back to active testing. All the way to the bottom, you're going to see the active API URL. Copy, head back to GitLab, paste. This is okay to be in plain text. You can add it as a variable as well, right? It's entirely up to you. Now the severity threshold says, okay, at what level of severity issues would you like to stop the pipeline? And we're saying at medium and above, medium and high, that is. And you have also the option to specify none, in which case you will never going to stop. Okay, you will never going to stop, irrespective of what severity issues you get. Now the scan job is the important part. The scan job pretty much executes a Docker container, Docker run. That's what it does. It's the active CLI. The active CLI embeds, subsumes an active worker. So all your tests are going to be executed at the CLI level. At the CLI level, all your tests will execute at the pipeline level. My apologies. At the pipeline level. Okay? Keep that in mind. You're not going to be accessing anything external. You're not going to go to those remote workers or any of those worker pools. No, everything is self-contained within this active CLI. Right? The only thing this active CLI is going to do is communicate the results of your scan to active testing. That's the only thing it's going to do. Okay? So, we updated the value. Let me make sure. 18, 119, great. The scan job is going to do a login first. You need to do the login first, and it's making use of training at namesecurity.com, and it's making use of the password we just set up. And here's the registry, the location of the registry, the JFrog registry that you need to fetch the corresponding container, the active CLI. Right? So the login is necessary. As soon as the login is done, then you're going to execute a Docker run command. You're going to pull the container, and now you're going to indicate, here it is. You're going to say, okay, mount whatever is in the present working directory under the OpenAPI specification folder into the volume /OAS within your container. So those relative paths we specified earlier on, /OAS, /users, whatever, /flights. So it is accessible to the container. And you're going to do the same exact thing for no name, because you're indicating that, hey, the active config file path is under no name active config.json, which is exactly what we set up in our code, in our configuration, and where we place the corresponding files. And then you're saying, okay, here's the active URL. Then you're passing arguments. Here's the active URL. Here's the API token. And here's the test group ID. The test group ID is what I showed you earlier on when we were going through the test profiles. This actually indicates which test profile you would like to execute. That's what it indicates, which test profile you would like to execute. And if I show you again, let me collapse this. If I go back under test profiles, and remember, we're interested in the no-name test, right? So if I go and I expand everything, here's the no-name test. Copy the test profile ID, right? If I copy this profile ID, I'm going to go back to my pipeline just to make sure that I'm using the right thing, right? So I'm going to wipe it out. I'm going to replace it with whatever I have in my clipboard. If I paste, Here it is. So it's the same exact ID. So generally speaking, I have not seen those IDs changing. So that's why you can keep it hard coded. But always it's worth a trip to the test profiles and make sure you use the right test profile. The branch, main. How do I know? Because my branch is called main. The severity threshold, whatever you set up earlier on. And that should do it. This should do it. The only thing we have left to do is commit the changes. Head back to the pipelines. Select the no-name scan and select the scan job. And now wait until we see the terminal providing us with the result. Now this is wait. Now I'm not going to wait here indefinitely. What I'm going to do is I'm going to resize it a little bit. I don't need this editor anymore, and I'm going to go back to my active test, my application, my flights API, and I'm going to clean up house. I'm going to clean up house, right, like this. Why? Because I want to show you that as soon as my pipeline starts, it's going to start executing the scans against my application. Remember what I said when we were defining the active config.json. Generally speaking, you want to specify that as localhost, the base URL as localhost. Why? Because you expect the pipeline to be building your code and installing it locally, right? In our case, we choose not to do that because for the sake of brevity, for the sake of simplicity. Instead, we use the same exact endpoint that we use in the user interface. And there we go. The scan job has started. So there is a little bit of, it takes a little bit of time because GitLab makes use of Docker containers, and now you need to use additional Docker containers to fetch the active CLI and so on, right? So it takes a little bit of time, but the telltale signs should be right there, very visible soon enough. If we've done any mistake, it's going to tell us right away. So in our case, the login was successful because I'm seeing we're pulling stuff, right? Login is to tell us login somewhere here. Here it is. Login succeeded. Now we're pulling everything we need to pull, right? And at some point, it's going to start with a test. All right. Keep an eye on both the terminal and both the pipeline output, the scan job output. There you go. You just downloaded the container. Here it is. Again, my apologies for the pause, but I needed to clear my throat and have some water. Here it is. There. The scan is running. And here's the results. Still running. It's not done. And why am I waiting here? Primarily because as soon as you get the briefs for the summary of every single test, whether it was passed, whether it was failed, give it a chance. Almost there, guys. As soon as you get all the summary for every single test, you're also going to get more details about every single test that failed. Right? I'm waiting for it. Usually it doesn't take this long, but hey, it is what it is. Here it is. That's what I was waiting for. Right? So it tells you that, hey, buddy, here's a summary of everything that failed, everything that passed. And for everything that failed, here's the description, here's the severity, the API, the description, and the remediation. So you get those extra pieces of information as well. Okay? All that information is right here. And the last thing I would like to show you in this very long stage or exercise is if I go back to active testing right now and I go back to my application and I go under scans, now you have an environment pull down menu. And now you can switch between the default, which is what you were working on thus far. You can switch between main, and you can see the corresponding issues. So as you can see, we run a single scan using the main branch. It's a different environment, right? As compared to the developer using the default, doing things from the user interface. And here's the result. Pretty much the same thing we're seeing all along. The only thing you don't see is pretty much the broken object level authorization, because we did not create Jane Doe. And with this, my good people, we concluded the third and final exercise of this course. There's one more recording, right, left, which is all about the summary, how you wrap up. I will highly encourage you to listen to it, because it's going to have some information about the assessment quiz and so on. But that's it, pretty much.